All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cutting straight through the heavy vendor bias to get to the objective, data-backed truth about the great headless versus WordPress debate. You know, if you've spent literally any time researching this, you already know the industry is incredibly polarized right now. But we're going to break down what the landscape actually looks like for 2026. Let's kick things off with a quote from Elementor that perfectly frames our entire journey today. It says, "The debate isn't about which system is inherently better, but about where you want to spend your engineering budget." I absolutely love starting here. It really highlights that choosing your tech stack is fundamentally a business and resource decision. It's not just a technical one. So here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, the great CMS debate. 2, monolith versus decoupled architecture. 3, comparing the real trade-offs. 4, the hybrid middle ground. 5, your headless migration checklist. And finally, 6, making the right choice. All right, section 1. The great CMS debate, cutting through the bias.
Okay, let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat. If you read typical industry articles, well, they've usually picked a side before writing a single word. Headless vendors, they'll insist WordPress is a dying plugin bloated liability. On the flip side, WordPress advocates will tell you headless is just an over-engineered solution desperately looking for a problem. Both of those framings are selling something. In this explainer, we're taking a radically neutral approach. Why? Because the reality is, a poorly executed, unoptimized headless site using client-side rendering can actually perform significantly worse than a well-tuned WordPress install. Architecture really just sets the ceiling, you know? Execution is what determines if you actually get there.
Moving on to section 2, monolith versus decoupled architecture, the structural divide. So the core difference here is completely structural. On one hand, we have WordPress, which is a monolithic or coupled system. I mean, it powers roughly 43% of the internet simply because it tightly couples your content database and your visual presentation. The backend and front end live in the exact same place. On the other hand, we have the headless approach. This entirely separates those two layers. Your content lives in a backend repository and is delivered totally raw via APIs like REST or GraphQL to absolutely any front-end framework you could ever want to build. Section 3. Comparing the real trade-offs, performance, cost, and SEO. Now, what's really fascinating here is the data from the HTTP Archive's Web Almanac. Looking at core web vitals, optimized headless setups, the ones using static generation and edge caching, can hit pass rates in the 90% range. Meanwhile, your average WordPress mobile site sits somewhere around 40%. So, headless gives you this massive raw performance advantage by completely eliminating server database queries when it serves those static files. But hold on, performance is only one piece of the puzzle, right? Let's look at how this actually impacts your marketing team. WordPress wins heavily on immediate SEO tooling. With plugins like Yoast or Rank Math, a content editor gets schema markup, XML sitemaps, and meta tags pretty much automatically. Conversely, a bare headless setup? Well, that requires developers to build all of that structured data and SEO tooling completely from scratch. It's an ongoing engineering commitment that simply does not exist in WordPress. So the crucial point here is understanding your total cost of ownership. Think of the sticker price exactly like an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is free open source WordPress versus, say, premium headless licensing. But the massive hidden costs lie entirely below the surface. For headless, that's the custom front-end engineering time to build the site and endlessly maintain those API integrations. For WordPress, the hidden cost is the endless, ongoing maintenance of plugin updates and security patching. That being said, headless really pulls ahead in two very specific scenarios. First, if you need to push complex content to multiple channels, think a website, a mobile app, and digital signage, all from a single source, headless is just unmatched. Second, it structurally reduces security risks. By completely hiding the content database behind an API with literally zero public-facing administrative login screens, you eliminate a massive attack surface. All right, section 4, the hybrid middle ground, best of both worlds. I want you to ask yourself a question. What if you didn't actually have to choose? What if you could have the visual, intuitive, editorial autonomy of WordPress, but the complete developer freedom, security, and raw performance of a headless architecture? Well, that brings us to decoupled WordPress. This is a highly pragmatic, hybrid approach. Writers and marketers get to keep their completely familiar WordPress dashboard to manage all their content, but behind the scenes, developers disable the PHP themes entirely. Instead, they use the WordPress REST API or WP GraphQL to pull that content into a blazing fast, super secure static frontend built on modern frameworks like Next.js or Astro. Basically, you maintain two systems, but you get the exact benefits of both. Similarly, if you're moving away from WordPress entirely, enterprise solutions now offer hybrid headless platforms. Pure headless gives you strict API-first developer freedom, sure, but it can leave your editors flying completely blind without previews. Hybrid headless platforms balance that developer freedom with the visual live previews, localization workflows, and governance tools that your marketing teams desperately need to actually do their jobs. Section 5. Your headless migration checklist, the 6-step roadmap. So if you've evaluated your team and decided the leap to headless is absolutely worth it, let's transition from theory to practice. The first 3 steps are foundational. First up, you export your data. Second, and this is absolutely critical, you must rigorously map and model your content. This is your big chance to drop years of accumulated WordPress plugin cruft and unused meta fields. Whatever you do, do not blindly port a bad model. Third, execute a scripted, repeatable import via an API or CLI. Media usually goes first, then body text. Doing this programmatically means you can run dry runs and iterate without manually patching a totally botched data load. The final 3 steps are where your new site really comes to life. Step 4 is rebuilding your presentation layer and explicit SEO infrastructure in your new framework. Step 5 is painstaking but absolutely vital, mapping 301 redirects from your old URLs to your new ones so you don't instantly destroy your organic search traffic. Finally, Step 6 is a thorough QA to verify content parity, core web vitals, and structural SEO before you finally cut over your DNS. And the reward for all that hard work is massive. According to industry data, typical migrations see a 25 to 40% reduction in ongoing hosting and maintenance costs. You are essentially eliminating the stressful weekly will this break the site game of plugin updates, and you're trading a heavy LAMP stack for highly efficient static delivery on a global CDN. Finally, Section 6, making the right choice, diagnosing your ideal path. To sum up all our findings today, stick with WordPress if you have a tight budget, a small team of non-technical editors, and just a single-channel website. Honestly, it is still a fantastic tool for that exact job. However, you should absolutely transition to a headless architecture if you have dedicated engineering resources, highly complex content models, and a genuine need to push that content to multiple channels at scale. When you're making your choice, ask yourself this one final thing. Which resource do you actually have more of? Do you have the budget for custom engineering, or do you have a high tolerance for managing plugins? I really challenge you to audit your team's actual capabilities, rather than just staring at a feature list. That honest answer will point you to the right platform every single time.